You know, I didn't get the ostrich story for a long time. It just seemed a little too odd, a little too niche, a little too obscure. I mean, not to be mean, but I don't really have a natural affinity for ostriches. I don't think a lot of people do. They're not exactly swans or even peacocks. I mean, they're not beautiful. But this is not a test of your affection for a particular species. I mean, it's very easy to love dogs, isn't it? Much more than to love ostriches, but that is not the point. The point isn't even about animals themselves. I don't actually believe in animal rights. I believe that animals are property. We should treat them humanely, but that's more a limit on our own conduct. It's not for the sake of the animals. We must not be cruel to other people or other living things. But this ostrich story, the more I've learned about it, it's about people and about governments. Ostriches just happen to be the flashpoint. It's about a government that insists on mass killing hundreds of healthy birds because last year a fraction of them got sick, but then they all got better and now they are immune. That's an interesting story. And it's about a foolish, slavish adherence to Kafkaesque rules, red tape that makes no sense, processes that make no sense. And if you ask about it, you'll be told, don't ask, or you'll get in trouble. Like, I mean, one of the craziest things is that the farm themselves have offered to test the birds to show they're not sick. And the government says, if you test the birds on your own, that is an offense and you'll be fined or even jailed. That's Kafka. It's about a total lack of transparency, including even about the so-called science. I'd like to see the science here. What is the science exactly that says we have to kill healthy birds? It reminds me of the same science that for a period of a few years during COVID-19, suddenly natural immunity, i.e. the kind of thing we all did when we were kids. You know, I remember when I was a kid and someone got chickenpox or measles, all the other mums and dads had our kids play with those kids, had their kids play with those kids, so you would get sick as a kid and then get immune. That's called natural immunity. It's been known about for centuries. Suddenly, natural immunity doesn't apply to COVID-19. Suddenly, natural immunity doesn't apply in the case of these birds. I mean, that's what I mean by junk science, but we're supposed to believe it because they're wearing hazmat suits. It's also about the thuggish threats of police to enforce foolish political policies. There were some police forces around the world that said, yeah, no, we're not getting into mask patrol. We're not getting into 6 foot of separation patrol. But those were fewer in number than the police who loved it. I remember seeing a video of some cops literally with a measuring tape in a barber shop to make sure that barbers' chairs were 6 feet apart and not an inch less because, you know, science, if it's 6 feet less an inch. Of course, in some countries it was 2 meters. Not 6 feet. They're not the same. In some places it was 1 meter. You think there was science behind that? There was not. All of those things are back here again. All of them are back. And there's lots of questions to be asked about it, but very few answers. Just speculation and conspiracy theories fill the void. If you remember, the very first person I interviewed when I went to the ostrich farm was the cop to try and get some understanding. There was no understanding to be coming. Basically, the cop said, we're not in control. We're here to be errand boys for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They're calling the shots. We're just doing what we're told. Really? Can anyone rent you for this? Can any bureaucrat get 50 cops to be pulled away from everything less important, to go into the middle of BC for a month or two and just be on standby? I mean, what powers do this CFIA have? And just all of these things and no transparency. Of course, conspiracy theories are running wild. It has to fill the void. And in that way, it's just like COVID too, isn't it? And if you dare say the wrong things during COVID times, you'll be shut down on social media, on Facebook, on YouTube. If you dare say, well, maybe it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, well, back then you would lose your voice. And so far that hasn't happened here. It reminds me of that silly saying, shut up, he explained. That's the only explanation we've received from authorities. So I went to the source about this whole regime. Who's the boss? Who's in charge? It's not the RCMP. They told me. The CFIA, well, they answer to someone. Who do they answer to? Well, I Googled it. And the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and again, why is the Food Inspection Agency having anything to do with ostriches that are not for food? That's weird. Do they even have any experience with it? That's weird. Anyways, they all answer to the Minister of Health, and I didn't know who Mark Carney's new Minister of Health was, but her name is Marjorie Michel. And she's actually from Justin Trudeau's old district in Quebec called Papineau. She's a Haitian Canadian, and I found this really interesting. Her dad used to be the Prime Minister of Haiti. So I don't know what that says other than if she grew up in the household of a Prime Minister, she probably is fairly savvy, even if she's not that smart, and I have no idea how smart or dumb she is. She would know how a Prime Minister talks and, pivots and dodges questions. Like, even if you're not smart, growing up in the household of another politician, you just learn. So I'm guessing she's not a bad politician. And I assume she's smart enough to make it into cabinet, although looking at Melanie Joly, I realize it's a very low bar. Stephen Guilbeault even lower. Anyways, so I was looking forward to putting a question to her. Now, how could I do that? Because, of course, Rebel News never gets accredited in the House of Commons. Well, that's the thing. Marjorie Michel was on the road. She was going to Alberta for a joint press conference after joint meetings with all of her provincial counterparts. So it was the federal health minister, Marjorie Michel, and all the provincial and territorial ones gathered together. So Alberta was co-hosting it, and I applied to be credentialed. I applied through the federal government. They simply refused to write back. So I applied through the provincial government, and I said, look, don't let the feds bring their Ottawa censorship to free Alberta. And there was a back and forth, and in the end, the federal government agreed to credential Rebel News, which was pretty cool. And they said, Ezra, are you going to be on your good behavior? And I said, of course I am. I mean, when am I not? I made a joke about, that clip from The Office where Jim was asked, Jim, I need you to be on your best behavior. And he said, well, I already promised someone else I'd be on my worst behavior. I made that joke. And then I immediately said, I'm kidding. I'll be on my best behavior. I was early. I checked in. I introduced myself. I got my name tag. I was literally, I think there was one other journalist in the room. I checked in so early. I sat near the mic, and I thought, what a good boy am I. And then they opened up the questions, and I put a question to the Alberta health minister about a different subject, but then I asked I was given two questions. I asked the federal health minister a question, and she actually looked engaged. She actually looked interested. Here is my question. My question sounds long, but I timed it. It's actually less than a minute, and there wasn't even 1 second after I finished my question that someone interrupted. Here, watch for yourself. Here's the whole thing. Take a look. Thank you, Minister, for agreeing to accredit Rebel News. I very much appreciate your dedication to freedom of the press. I have a question about the ostrich farm. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask about the lawsuit because I don't want you to talk about anything that are before the courts. But there was a letter, and I noticed in the statement you talk about Canada-U.S. cooperation. I know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your U.S. counterpart, has written saying he thinks that there's some medical research value in these ostriches because they had avian flu, but then have recovered and are now immune. In fact, he's offered to do the research and even to pay for it. It seems to me that we need allies around Trump's cabinet table. And if you could throw him a bone and say, sure, Secretary Kennedy, you can study these birds, it's sort of no skin off Canada's nose. And don't you think it would be helpful to have an ally in Trump's cabinet when we're doing our trade negotiations?
Prochaine question, merci.
That's my question. Don't you think it would be helpful to have a friend?
Next reporter, merci.
Oh, you're not going to answer, Minister?
Prochaine question, merci.
I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?
Next question, thank you.
Minister, did I miss an answer? I don't get it. Okay, I'll sit down. I guess it's question period, not answer period.
Merci beaucoup.
What on earth was going on? As soon as I said my question, he said prochaine question or something, which I knew enough French, it means the next question. I thought maybe he was saying, all right, wrap it up, Levant. You've been talking for a full minute. Where's your question? I honestly thought his first interruption was because I was going long. So he said, oh, that is my question. Why won't you throw Trump a bone? And then he just said, next question in French. And I thought, am I missing something? So I put on my simultaneous translation headphones. But no, he kept interrupting. It took me about 3 times to realize what was going on. Now, the minister herself looked at me. She was attentive. I know she can speak English, and even if she didn't have a strong grasp of it, those headsets are translation. But why was some guy whose name I don't even know, who was he, who was interrupting his boss? I mean, why would you have a press conference and why would you credential journalists if you simply weren't going to answer? Now, part of me thinks she was being handled by that staffer. And if I was a leftist, I'd say, oh, so he was mansplaining to her. He didn't think the poor little lady could answer it. He was white-splaining to her. That's what I would say if I was on the left. I'm not really on the left, but it is noticeable that she was being handled by someone who we don't know. She's not really the cabinet minister in charge of health, is she? She reports to a boss, some guy on the side saying, next question, who is the boss? I do not know. But I have a theory that guy who kept interrupting, I have a theory that he's some communications staffer, probably sent from the Prime Minister's office to stop her from interacting from Rebel News. And I actually, hand to God, I think he believes their BS propaganda that we are like January 6th insurrectionists, we're domestic right-wing extremists, and that maybe I was going to hop over and, wrestle her or something. I think they believe their BS. They thought this about the Canadian truckers. Oh my God, they're so dangerous. No, they got bouncy castles and hot tubs. These people hate ordinary Canadians, especially those on the right. Anyways, it was sort of fruitless in a way. It's sort of like when we used to talk to Jagmeet Singh. Remember that loser, that footnote in history, that nothing, that empty suit? And we would ask him questions and he would never answer. Remember when Drea Humphrey put a great question to him at the last leaders debate? Here, let me play it again for you. Take a look.
Hello, Mr. Singh. Drea Humphrey with Rebel News. Your party takes great pride in standing against hate such as white supremacy, Islamophobia, and online.
Sorry, I didn't get your outlet.
Drea Humphrey with Rebel News.
Okay.
Your party.
You know where I'm going to go with this, though, right?
Can I speak?
Yeah, you can. I'm just going to say you know where I'm going to go with it, though.
Wow.
Your party takes pride in standing against hate such as white supremacy, Islamophobia, and online hate speech. Yet you stay silent about ongoing attacks against Christians, even after Conservative MP Jamil Javani's order paper question revealed that over 200 churches have been targeted by arson and vandalism since claims of remains being discovered at former residential schools swept the nation in 2021. These claims have been disproven by bands that excavated and remain unproven by those that have not. Will you condemn the rise in acts of hate against Christians today and explain what your party will do moving forward to keep Christians safe from hate in Canada?
Again, thank you, but I'm not going to respond to an organization that promotes misinformation and disinformation like Rebel News. So no, I'm not going to respond to your question.
Wow.
What she said had no misinformation in it.
Perhaps you didn't hear me. Over 200 Christian places of worship have been attacked in Canada since 2021. Many served First Nations communities, many were historic, and they diverted police and resources and put others at risk. What do you say to Canadians who see your refusal to answer, especially from one of the few media outlets here that are not funded by the state, as proof that a vote for you is a vote for a dangerous radical party that gaslights the public into thinking it stands against hate when its silence is instead emboldening Christophobia?
Your question is another example of why I don't respond to agencies like Rebel News that promote misinformation and disinformation.
In the case of Jagmeet Singh, and I say this, I've thought about this a lot, I don't think this is name calling. I think Jagmeet Singh was always a little bit dumb. Have you ever seen him say anything deep or complex or full of policy? He was always like as deep as a puddle, and he would have a few catchy phrases. I think his say, "Oh, I don't talk to Rebel News," was just a dumb guy's way of saying, I don't have any clue what you're talking about. I don't have a good answer, so I'm going to rename my stupidity as some sort of weird principle that I don't talk to conservatives, which is not a good principle. Anyway, so I tweeted, Rebel News first tweeted, and then I personally retweeted that video. And between the two tweets, about 1 million people watched I wouldn't even call it an interaction because it wasn't very interactive, watched my question and the lack of answers. And I don't know if most people had even heard of this Marjorie Michel before. I honestly didn't until I Googled her. What a bad way to make your introduction to Canadian life, to Canadian political life, as the woman either unable or unallowed to answer a pretty friendly question. Let's play it one more time. I put it to you, this was friendly. This was me on my best behavior. And I thought this was an interesting question. I bet you haven't heard that question before, have you? Here, take a look. Thank you, Minister, for agreeing to accredit Rebel News. I very much appreciate your dedication to freedom of the press. I have a question about the ostrich farm. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask about the lawsuit because I don't want you to talk about anything that are before the courts. But there was a letter, and I noticed in the statement you talk about Canada-U.S. cooperation. I know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your U.S. counterpart, has written saying he thinks that there's some medical research value in these ostriches because they had avian flu, but then have recovered and are now immune. In fact, he's offered to do the research and even to pay for it. It seems to me that we need allies around Trump's cabinet table. And if you could throw him a bone and say, sure, Secretary Kennedy, you can study these birds, it's sort of no skin off Canada's nose, and don't you think it would be helpful to have an ally in Trump's cabinet when we're doing our trade negotiations?
Prochaine question, merci.
That's my question. Don't you think it would be helpful to have a friend?
Next reporter, merci.
Oh, you're not going to answer, Minister?
Prochaine question, merci.
I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?
Next question, thank you.
Minister, did I miss an answer? I don't get it. Okay, I'll sit down. I guess it's question period, not answer period.
Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, just stonewalling. In a way, it reminded me of my one-sided interview with Avi Yamini of Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer. Remember that one? Here's just a few moments from that.
Mr. Bourla, can I ask you, when did you know that the vaccines didn't stop transmission? How long did you know that without saying it publicly?
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Answer that question. I mean, we now know that the vaccines didn't stop transmission, but why did you keep it secret? You said it was 100% effective, then 90%, then 80%, then 70%. But we now know that the vaccines do not stop transmission. Why did you keep that secret?
Have a nice day.
I won't have a nice day until I know the answer. Why did you keep it a secret that your vaccine did not stop transmission?
Is it time to apologise to the world, sir? To give refunds back to the countries that poured all their money into your vaccine that doesn't work, your ineffective vaccine?
You know, I get that a lot at Davos. Here's a few moments with Larry Fink, the boss of BlackRock. Same thing, no answers. Remember that one?
Mr. Fink, are you going to follow Donald Trump's plan and get rid of DEI and ESG in your companies? BlackRock really is the opposite of Donald Trump in so many ways. You're authoritarian, you're anti-populist, you're top-down. Are you going to change it all in light of the U.S. presidency? How is Donald Trump, have you talked to Donald Trump since he was elected? Is the World Economic Forum a counterpoint to Donald Trump?
The thing about Bourla and Larry Fink is they're not political officials. They're public in the sense that they're in the public sphere, and the public, there's a lot of interaction. They control a lot of things. But at the end of the day, Albert Bourla and Larry Fink work for companies, not for me. I'm not a shareholder of their companies. I'm just a media person on the street. In a way, I mean, I think it shows a thin skin on their part. I think it shows a lack of transparency. I think it shows a haughtiness. But I don't know if there's anything morally wrong with a businessman ignoring a stranger journalist. But what about Marjorie Michel? Because I'm not an outsider. I'm a full Canadian citizen. In fact, I've been a citizen longer than she's been. I was a citizen since I was born. How dare she look down her nose at me and her staffer? It's so gross. This is a cabinet minister who works for me. I think in Canada, they've been in power so long that they believe that the government is our master, not our servant. I think they need to have their attitude changed on that, don't you?